He unclipped his cuffs on my porch like he was about to teach me a lesson. I told him if he touched me, he'd be adding assault on a federal officer to a very long day. 30 minutes later, Internal Affairs was on my lawn, and his badge wasn't on his chest anymore. It sounds like a movie, I know, but this is just a Sunday in Oak Creek that went sideways because a man decided I didn't belong in the house I paid for, you know what I mean? If you've ever felt your safety get thin in the very place that's supposed to hold you, yeah, that happened to me. It was bright and warm and ordinary. The kind of afternoon that makes you forgive every hard winter you've ever survived. I was in a floral sundress, bare feet, paperback open on my lap, the smell of cut grass and hydrangeas drifting over the porch, neighbors doing neighbor things down the block, a mower humming, a kid dragging chalk across the sidewalk like he was mapping a new planet. Peace finally felt like something I wasn't borrowing. And then I heard a cruiser rolling slow, not cruising really, more like circling like a shark shadow. You can't quite see, but you can feel in your bones. He parked right in front, took his time getting out. Big man, neck tight against his collar, sunglasses reflecting everything but himself, boots biting into my lawn like he owned the dirt, the nameplate said Sergeant D. Harding, and the greeting was one word that landed like an accusation. Afternoon. I gave him one back, polite, steady, because I always start there. The calm place, the place where adults solve simple misunderstandings, and I asked him if there was a problem, if someone had called, if there was something about my house he needed to check, because hey, we all live in the same city and sometimes things happen, right? He looked past the moving boxes just inside the door, skipped the welcome mat. With my last name on it, skipped the book in my hand, settled his gaze on the color of my skin like it was the only detail that mattered, and said he needed ID and proof of residence deed. Lease something with my name and this address, his hand resting where cops rest their hands when they want you to see the gun and not the human. Years of training slid up my spine and sat behind my eyes. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I know the difference between community safety and a man looking for a reason. I asked for legal grounds, asked if I was being detained for a specific crime, asked what exactly about a woman reading a book on her own porch on a sunny afternoon fit his daytime burglary theory. And that's when he said the quiet part. This neighborhood has a standard, and we like to keep it pure. Pure, he said, like that word wasn't soaked in a century of other people's fear, like it didn't smack with all the times law and order got weaponized to mean keep certain people out. And I felt that cold anger that doesn't raise its voice move into my chest, the kind that slows everything down so you don't miss the next move, the kind that remembers where every camera is pointed. I stood small motion, big shift, because when someone tells you you're out of place on your own porch, the first truth you can claim is your posture. I told him he was making a mistake, gave him one more chance to get back in his car and do real police work somewhere else. And he laughed that laugh. Men laugh when they're used to winning by volume. Unclipped his cuffs with a neat little click and announced I was coming with him so we could sort my story out downtown. I said, "Touch me and you add assault on a federal officer to your list." He told me to stop playing, asked if my badge came out of a cereal box. The rookie in the passenger seat finally climbed out and hovered on the grass. Young face already asking the right questions inside his head. And I did the slowest, cleanest thing a person can do when they carry two truths. I lifted the hem of my dress just enough to unclip a leather credential case from the holster on my thigh. I didn't touch the Glock. I didn't reach toward anything that could be misread by a man who had already decided I was a problem. I just opened the case and let the sun catch the shield so it flashed gold and real and official across his face. Special Agent Sarah Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, badge number 7355. You can run it, or you can call your chief. He smirked and called it fake, said impersonating a federal officer was a felony, and I said, great, let's save time. Patch me to Chief Michael Davis, you know, the one who loves policy and paperwork and consent decrees. And I watched the smirk stumble as the name landed, not because I dropped a celebrity, but because I dropped precision. Specific beats, bluster in every room, and I dialed it. Rang once. I said, "Hey, Uncle Mike, sorry to bug you on a day off. I've got a sergeant at my new place, and he's about to mistake my porch for his kingdom." The dispatcher cracked over the radio. "All units hold traffic on 1, Chief Davis," taking the channel, and the chief's voice came through like granite with a pulse. "Sergeant Harding, you will stand down. You will not move. You will not speak to Agent Johnson. You will wait for my arrival. Internal Affairs is en route. Do you understand me?" He tried a "but sir," and the chief burned the "but" to ash with "do you understand me?" And just like that, the air changed. Power doesn't leave quietly, but it does leave when the record button is red and the right voice says enough. Those minutes from that order to the arrival of IA stretched like taffy. The neighbor across the street who had brought me lemon loaf 2 days earlier stood on her steps, wringing her hands. The guy who had paused his mower stuck there between curiosity and shame. The rookie stared somewhere past all of us like he was watching a version of himself walk away, and he wasn't sure if he should follow. And Harding stood and simmered, boot treads pressed into my lawn like tally marks for every bad decision he'd made in the last 15 minutes. The unmarked sedan slid up behind his cruiser. 2 IA investigators stepped out with the practiced quiet of people who have to do this more than they should. They didn't stare at me or the sundress or the book. They looked at Harding and said his name and said administrative leave and said, "Please surrender your weapon and badge. And if you think a badge doesn't feel heavy until it's leaving a uniform, then you've never watched a man realize the object he used to make himself big can also make him small." Chief Davis pulled up next. Not in uniform, didn't need it. Authority sat on him like a second skin. He walked past the spectacle and onto my porch, asked if I was okay, and I told him I was fine, annoyed, ready to finish my chapter. We both looked up at the small camera under the eave like it was a quiet friend, and he told IA to pull my porch footage and Harding's dash audio, because funny how body cams love to malfunction when accountability might be around the corner. And I said the footage had already mirrored to a secure cloud and an FBI server. And yes, the timestamps were clean, and yes, the chain of custody would hold, because I don't go anywhere without redundancy anymore. Then came the part people like to call a twist, even though the truth is usually sitting in plain sight. The chief's phone buzzed and he told IA it was time the sealed warrant had been greenlit. Raids were moving on 2 other sergeants we'd been watching for months, Jennings and Peterson, the friendly-sounding old guard who called themselves the gatekeepers like they were protecting standards when they were really protecting their own shortcuts. Phones lit up on nearby radios with addresses and unit numbers, and a kind of electricity ran through the quiet street. That wasn't panic, it was relief. The thing about a dam is it looks solid until the first crack shows everyone how much water it was holding back. The rookie officer Miller flinched at the sound of the names, and the chief caught it. He called Miller over and asked him if he had intervened at any point during what he'd just witnessed. If he had told his sergeant that demanding papers without a lawful basis was illegal, if he had attempted to de-escalate anything at all. And the kid said, "No, sir, because fear is honest even when it's ugly." And the chief didn't roar. He said, "You can keep your silence and end your career now, or you can give a full statement and start telling the truth. You were hired to serve." And the kid inhaled, looked at his sergeant sitting there on a patch of chewed-up pride, looked at me and said, "I'll give a full statement," and I swear you could feel the street let out a breath it had been holding for years. News trucks arrived late like they always do. Blue lights from cruisers washed the hedges and the hydrangeas in a color that doesn't belong to summer. A reporter practiced his "I care about the community" face. They filmed the badge going into an evidence bag and the IA sedan easing away with Harding in the back seat. And I didn't give them a quote because this wasn't content to me, it was consequence. And by the time the 6 o'clock hit, the tip line was ringing so hard the producer probably had to start a spreadsheet just to keep the stories straight. The next hours and days turned systematic, not cinematic, the way real accountability does. Interviews, sworn statements, warrants, the quiet, terrifying efficiency of opening lockers and imaging hard drives and finding the same baggies in the same corners and comparing body cam gaps with dash audio that didn't get the message to take a nap. Internal Affairs did. It's slow work. The Bureau did ours, the U.S. Attorney ran point, because when civil rights get violated under color of law, it doesn't stay local. The rookie talked for hours and brought dates and names and phrases like they call it laying down the law when they mean intimidate people who look like me, and the file cabinets filled with the paper version of everything folks had been whispering for years. My neighbors came by the next afternoon with honesty that looked like shame. "Mrs. Gable said we saw and we didn't do anything, and I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson said Harding has a reputation and we didn't want trouble." And I told them fear is human, but silence is a choice. If IA asks you what you saw, I hope you'll tell it. We can't outrun this if we pretend our legs are broken. They promised they would. And later that night, my phone buzzed with a photo of porch lights and small candles around the cul-de-sac, with a text that said, "We're not scared anymore. Welcome to the neighborhood for real. And if you think I didn't sit there and let my shoulders drop a few inches, you don't understand how long a person can hold themselves braced for impact." In the weeks that followed, the story stopped being about me and started being about us. The department launched audits, the city brought in oversight with teeth training on de-escalation, and bias wasn't a box to check anymore. It was a room to sit in until honesty replaced the kind of comfort that rots things from the inside. Jennings and Peterson took pleas. Harding watched his own face on a small TV as legal analysts explained to the public in slow, clear language how many lines you can't cross in 15 minutes without it becoming a conspiracy. Miller started wearing the uniform like service instead of silence, and the gatekeepers stopped being a myth and started being a cautionary tale told in courtrooms and classrooms. There was a block party about a month later because communities get tired of holding their breath, and food is an old language for "we're trying again." Kids turned the street into a chalk galaxy. A neighbor dragged out a grill big enough to legally qualify as infrastructure. Chief Davis stopped by out of uniform, with the look people get when they've been doing hard work in rooms without windows and finally step into the sun. We ate and laughed, and the sirens that used to cut through dinner like a bad memory sounded farther away. Not gone, just not breathing down your neck every minute. And yeah, if you're waiting for the part where I say I forgave him, I'm not there yet. Accountability isn't revenge, and forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. I don't need him to be the villain forever for me to be okay. I needed him to stop putting his weight on people like me because his badge told him he could. And the system that stood up for me is the same system a lot of people are afraid of, for good reasons. Both of those truths sit next to each other like stubborn neighbors. We don't fix it by pretending one of them isn't there. We fix it by wiring cameras to clouds and policies to teeth and courage to communities, until the next. Harding looks at a porch like mine and remembers that standard isn't a code word for purity. It's a promise that applies to everyone. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I won because evidence doesn't blink, because my voice stayed calm when it would have been a relief to shout, because the right person answered the phone and said stand down, because a rookie decided to be a witness instead of a shadow, because a neighborhood decided that watching in silence is not the same as peace. And if you're wondering what you're supposed to do the next time something ugly blooms on a street that looks like yours, I'll tell you what I tell my nieces. If you can speak without setting your life on fire, speak. If you can record safely, record. If you can testify without breaking, testify. And if you wear a uniform and someone with more stripes tries to turn you into a bystander with a badge, choose the hard thing before the hard thing chooses you. The porch is quiet again most nights. The book finally got finished. I still look at the camera before I sit down because the body learns habits faster than it unlearns fear. But the hum is back. A kid shoots baskets in the driveway and his laughter comes through the maple leaves like a promise. A neighbor carries a sleeping toddler inside, and the whole scene looks so ordinary it feels radical. And I sit there thinking about the thin line between a quiet afternoon and a public spectacle. How quickly power can turn a sidewalk into a stage and a woman into a test. And then I think about that moment. The chief's voice hit the radio, and the power flipped without a single gun clearing a holster. And I realized that courage, evidence, community, none of them work alone for long, but together they make bullies small enough to fit inside the truth. So tell me this and be honest about where you live. What shuts injustice down faster where you are, courage, evidence, or community? Which one have you actually seen change an outcome when it mattered? Have you ever been the person who spoke up or the one who wished they had? Drop your city. Tell me your story. Push back if you need to. And if any part of this felt like your porch or your block or your skin, share it more. Eyes make fewer shadows. And the next time someone says pure like it's a compliment, I want there to be 100 voices ready to say no, not here, not anymore.